I'm Charlotte Vincent. I'm the Artistic Director of Vincent Dance Theatre. In loco parentis is Latin for in the place of the parent, and this new work looks at young people's experience of going into care. The piece looks at the impact of domestic violence and substance misuse and neglect and abuse on children's lives, and how that kicks off a cycle of rupture and repair in their lives. And it looks at the potential difficulty of how you piece together your life story when you've been removed from your birth family. There's a young girl who's 11 and a 13-year-old boy, and they are holding their own in the work, working alongside and devising the work alongside the adult performers. It contains testimonies that I've gathered from the community, from care-experienced young people, from children in care councils and young people currently living in foster care, whether that's long-term placements or moving through the system, alongside interviews that I've conducted with adoptive parents, with foster carers, neonatologists and child psychologists that kind of give me an insight into the care system and the impact of the care system on young people's lives.
You know, it's like a wound that's healed over, but it isn't healed inside. And that stuff gets triggered, and it is an extreme response. It's not shouting. What she is rigid. She is shut down. Her entire body is shut down.
The piece combines movement, spoken word, real-life testimonies, and a large blackboard that the performers write and draw and dance around. What I found is that young people who go into care take a while to make sense of their life story, that it's a fragmented jigsaw without all the pieces there to put together. And I think that's the main difference between growing up securely attached to a birth family and maybe children who grow up without that in their lives, that there's a disruption, and that disruption has a massive impact on how they make sense of their own lives. So this piece, in a way, is to raise awareness about that experience of what it's like to go into care. It has a massive impact on everyone around, including the birth mothers and fathers who have their children removed from them. And I suppose this piece just wants to raise questions around attachment and security and feeling safe in the world. And most importantly, that thing that we all need, which is a sense of belonging. And the piece investigates and makes us think a little bit about what makes us feel like we belong.
He's sort of suddenly become really challenging. Much rather it happen now than he repressed it all, tried to be compliant, and then when he's a teenager it all kicks off and it's terrible, or he says yes to everything.
I have developed a practice where I'm really interested in putting non-professional and professional performers on stage together to see those two voices rub up against each other. And the results are quite raw. They're not as maybe defined or as slick as some dance productions, but I think the beauty of them is that you see vulnerability and you see a difference in age and experience, and it makes us work differently when we're creating work. And having those non-professional, younger performers in the work really exposes the nature of theatre itself, actually. It makes you really question what is real, what is representational, what's a metaphor, what is really going on in a live context.
Where is my baby?
And
where did everyone go? Why am I here?
By having young people on stage, there's a certain vulnerability that represents the vulnerability of the young people's stories that I've collected over the last 6 months.
And why did they take me? And why don't they love me?
I'm interested in the impact of having non-professionals on stage in a professional piece of work and the impact that has on an audience watching. It makes us feel uncomfortable, it makes us feel challenged, it makes us feel empathy, makes us will the non-professionals to do well, and all of that's going on, as well as the subject that I'm talking about. So in a way, it also means that through the community engagement work that we do, the audience for our work now is changing, and we are doing a lot of dialogue and workshop events around the work to get child psychologists, social workers, foster carers, foster children, adoptive parents to come and see the work alongside what might be a more conventional dance audience. And that for me is where my passion lies at the moment, to mix up the audience who watch my work as well as the cast who are on the stage, who make and perform the work. It's an interesting blending of all of our practice as teachers, facilitators, mentors within a devising process to make a piece of work. And it's quite a challenge for the performers to do that at times, because obviously they're looking out for their own work, but they also have to be very empathetic and confident and helpful with the young performers to help them to come up with the best material that they can too. And I think my research process is such that I'm pulling on my experience, 30-year experience as a facilitator in community practice, community arts practice, and pulling that and mashing it together with my experience as a theatre director and a choreographer. And that's where the work comes from, really. And I think that's quite unusual, and I like the way it's going because I think it is unusual, and I think it broadens out who this work is appropriate for. So our work, when we make film versions of this work, then tours to places that a live piece of, say, more conventional dance would never go. And that is absolutely growing our audiences into social care spaces, into formal education spaces, into art gallery worlds, as well as your conventional theatre spaces. It's more democratic as a process to make the work. It's more democratic performing the work with an intergenerational cast, and then where we distribute and take the work in its live form and in its film installation form is much, much wider than conventional dance shows allow. The work is quite edgy, it's quite raw, it has text in it, it has real life testimonies in it, it's quite inclusive, it is representing voices that maybe don't usually get heard in dance work. And I think what you would come to expect from a show of ours is to maybe be moved, to laugh a little bit, but also to be really stimulated and challenged by quite socio-political questions of our time. And so for me, this is also a political statement about how we as adults, how we as the people in charge treat young people, and that they really do deserve much more attention and much more support, whether they are trying to stay with birth families, which is a very difficult mix when there's neglect and abuse going on, whether they go into foster care and need support there, or whether they're adopted into new homes, and the support for that probably needs to be more as well. So there's something very deeply political about this new work. And I'm not trying to answer any questions, I'm just trying to pose them around what is care, what is a sense of belonging, and how do we as adults help children to feel that love and attention and care. The number of kids who are being adopted is falling from a peak in 2014-15, and it's falling consistently. What that means is more and more children will stay in long-term foster care or in care homes and not have that true sense of belonging that maybe returning to a birth family, however challenging that is, or being adopted might allow. And the impact of child developmental trauma and early neglect and abuse on these kids is massive.
It's like a jigsaw but with pieces missing, and then you get given those pieces over time.
In Loco Parentis is an attempt to raise awareness around the number of children who are in care, to give insight into their experience of the care system, to look at how difficult it is to foster care for a child and then let that go. And the whole system is based on loss. The birth parents lose their children into care. The foster carers lose their children once they've looked after them, unless it's long term. And actually, adoptive parents have told me really clearly that their whole lives are filled with this sense of loss because they're working and living with children who have something missing, and that missing bit can never be plugged. And so at every stage of this care, of children going into care, there is loss. And that's what the piece reflects on. What happens to these children? What happens to their mental health? What happens to their psychology? And what support is available to make those children have the best life they can possibly have?